Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, October 9, 2024. Hurricane Milton closes in on Florida's west coast with its damaging Category 4 storm surges, winds, and rains. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell says of those in the path, some of you might still be able to evacuate safely. For others, it may be too late. Coming up, we hear from the administrator plus Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, President Joe Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee. Former President Donald Trump, Republican presidential nominee, campaigns today in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Both vice presidential nominees, Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Walz, are in the battleground state of Arizona. Tim Walz joined by Jim McCain, son of the late Republican senator from Arizona, John McCain. President Biden, joined by Vice President Harris, speak by phone to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as Israel considers its response to Iran's last missile attack on Israel. And former U.S. Senator Tim Johnson has died. He was the last Democrat to win statewide in South Dakota. Story from the Tampa Bay Times. Hurricane Milton was a powerful Category 4 storm Wednesday as it barreled towards Florida's west coast. Forecasters predict the storm will maintain 125-mile-per-hour winds as a strong Cat 3 when it makes landfall in west central Florida late Wednesday, according to the National Hurricane Center. As the forecast cone narrowed Wednesday, Tampa Bay was still in Milton's sights, said Austin Flannery, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service's Ruskin office. Category 3 or Category 4, it doesn't really matter. It's a major hurricane making landfall, he said. We're still looking at the worst hurricane to impact the region in over 100 years. That was from the Tampa Bay Times. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis held a news conference early this morning at the State Emergency Operations Center in Tallahassee.
We're bracing. What we know we're going to get hit later tonight or early tomorrow morning. It is going to bring a lot of ferocity. It's going to bring a lot of hazards, a lot of damage. You still have time to make the decision to ensure your safety. You do not have to get on the interstate and drive to Georgia. You don't have to drive to Pensacola. You can go to a local shelter, which would be likely tens of miles away. We also have now these state shelters. There's massive, massive amounts of room in all of those shelters. You ride it out for a night. The storm's likely going to be gone on the east coast of Florida by tomorrow afternoon. You're going to obviously have first responders and everyone on the scene immediately and doing what they can. But you're going to be able to get back. You're going to be able to resume your life. But just make sure that you're putting yourself in a situation where you can safely weather this storm. So you still have time. Time is running out. But if you make that decision now, I think you'll be glad you did. Yep.
A lot of people are choosing to stay in Sarasota, Charlotte County. What's your message to those people that are choosing to stay in their homes?
Well, if you're not in an evacuation zone, I would imagine, because there's a lot of population in some of those areas, like Kevin said, if you're going to hunker down like that, you're basically going to be, if you're not in a flood, you're basically going to be concerned about the wind. And this is a strong storm. So if you start to hear popping, if you start to hear trees snapping, you got to treat that like a tornado, and you got to hunker down because you're going to have debris, you're going to have trees, you're going to have things that could potentially fly around and cause a threat to your life. Now, if you are in an evacuation zone and you're in places like Sarasota or Charlotte, just know that if you get 10 feet of storm surge, you can't just hunker down with that. That is ultimately the surge. Mother Nature is going to win that fight. So I think it's hazardous to be staying, particularly on those barrier islands in Sarasota County, particularly on the barrier islands and other parts of coastal Charlotte County. And so if you're in an evacuation zone, you can just get up, go to one of the many shelters that are available. Maybe you have friends and family close by. Maybe you want to get on the interstate. I would say that's going to be a little dicey, but some people will want to do that. So you still have time to do it. But and we don't know, look, this track of this storm, where it hits, and is it landfall going to be at Sarasota? Is it going to be further north, further south? Just understand, if you're on the southern part of this storm, you are going to get storm surge. So maybe it doesn't hit Charlotte County, maybe it hits Sarasota. Man, you're going to get a lot of storm surge further down south. That's just the reality. I mean, it's churning massive amounts of water, and that water is going to come out. There may be parts where it sucks it out, depending on how the storm goes in northern side of the storm. That's possible. But man, if you're anywhere in the eye or south, for sure, you are going to get major storm surge.
Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican of Florida, at the Emergency Operations Center in Tallahassee this morning. An Associated Press article about his news conference reads, Governor DeSantis described deployment of a wide range of resources, including 9,000 National Guard members from Florida and other states, over 50,000 utility workers from as far as California, and highway patrol cars with sirens to escort gasoline tankers to replenish supplies so people could fill up their tanks before evacuating. Joining Governor DeSantis at the press conference was the head of Florida's Emergency Management Agency, also the Transportation Secretary, Law Enforcement Commissioner, and David Kerner, Executive Director of Florida's Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles, who had a warning to would-be looters thinking of taking advantage of so many people leaving their homes unattended to get to safety from Hurricane Milton.
The governor talked a little bit yesterday about in the state of Florida, law and order state, Second Amendment state, you don't know what's behind that door, and I'm speaking directly to the criminal element that intend to take advantage of Floridians. The governor's right, you don't know who is behind that door, and they're probably armed. But if you find yourself in a situation where there's nobody in that home and you intend to burglarize it and take advantage of Floridians, there's going to be consequences. And I'll start with, first of all, you're going to have the Florida Highway Patrol, 2,000 state troopers. You're going to have FDLE. You're going to have out-of-county sheriffs. And now we're going to have out-of-state troopers. There's going to be a swarm of law enforcement officers. And I can tell you, on behalf of the Florida Highway Patrol, if we catch you and you try to escape, we're going to chase you. We're going to use intentional contact to stop the pursuit. We're not going to allow you to injure or kill Floridians because of your criminal activity. We're going to hold you accountable and get you in custody. FWC will be deployed. They will catch you in the water. We'll catch you on land. You have the National Guard and the State Guard. They'll catch you in the air. There's no escape from the resources of the state of Florida.
David Kerner is Executive Director of the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles at today's news conference in Tallahassee, Florida, with Governor Ron DeSantis. In Washington, the White House daily press schedule has this entry. 12 p.m., the President and the Vice President receive a briefing on the administration's life-saving preparations for Hurricane Milton, as well as the latest updates on the forecast and expected impacts for the state of Florida. The President and the Vice President will also receive an update on the ongoing response to the impacts of Hurricane Helene across the Southeast. The Vice President will join virtually. Both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, made remarks. The President was in the Eisenhower Executive Office building, the Vice President calling in from New York City.
In less than 14 hours, Hurricane Milton will make landfall on the western coast of Florida. Winds will be fierce at well over 100 miles per hour, with storm surges reaching up to 15 feet and up to 18 inches of rain. It's looking like the storm of the century. I'm here with leaders of my administration who are in the front lines preparing for this storm and will brief me in our latest efforts. To save lives and livelihoods, I want to emphasize a few things. First, many communities in Hurricane Milton's path do not have a moment to catch their breath between Helene and Milton. 2 historic storms in 2 weeks. I want to thank everyone who has followed local guidance to evacuate ahead of landfall. I know it's really tough leaving behind your home, your belongings, everything you own, but I urge everyone in Hurricane Milton's path to follow all safety instructions as we head to the next 24 hours. It's literally a matter of life and death. Second, for the last week, my team has done everything possible to prepare for this storm. I immediately approved emergency declarations in Florida and the Seminole Tribe in Florida. I also surged search and rescue teams, water, food, power generators, ambulances to the region. In my direction, Administrator Criswell will be in the State Emergency Operations Center in Florida tonight. And Kamala and I are going to keep pressure on the companies so prices stay stable on gasoline, flights, and goods people need. Finally, we're teaming up with state and local officials to support impacted communities. I spoke with the Florida Governor DeSantis, with Mayor the Tampa Mayor, the Clearwater Mayor, Rector, and the Pinellas County Chairwoman, Peters. I offer them everything we need, everything we have, everything they need. And I made it clear to them they should reach out if there's anything more they need. I gave them my personal phone number here at the White House to contact me directly if that's necessary. Let me close with this. I want to thank the governors of all the affected areas over the last couple of weeks. Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Virginia. You know, we've been in constant contact, and they've been very thankful and appreciative of the help the federal government is providing. And I'm appreciative of all they're doing as well. And I've told them to contact me with anything else they need. We have made available an unprecedented number of assets to deal with this crisis. We're going to continue to do so until the job is done. But now I want to be clear about something. For the last few weeks, there's been a reckless, irresponsible, and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies that are disturbing people. It's undermining confidence in the incredible rescue and recovery work that has already been taken and will continue to be taken. And it's harmful to those who need help the most. There's simply no place for this to happen. Former President Trump has led the onslaught of lies. Assertions have been made that property is being confiscated. That's simply not true. They're saying people impacted by these storms will receive $750 in cash and no more. That's simply not true. They're saying the money is needed for this crisis is being diverted to migrants. What a ridiculous thing to say. It's not true. Now the claims are getting even more bizarre. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman from Georgia, is now saying the federal government is literally controlling the weather. We're controlling the weather. It's beyond ridiculous. It's got to stop. In moments like this, there are no red or blue states. There's one United States of America, where neighbors are helping neighbors. Volunteers and first responders are risking everything, including their own lives, to help their fellow Americans. State, local, and federal officials are standing side by side. Let me repeat, no one should make the American people question whether their governments will make sure that this disaster, when it strikes, they'll be there. We will, all of us. I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Harris, if that's okay with all of you. Thank you. Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Liz, thank you for the work that you have been doing. As the president said, we've been working around the clock to prepare for Hurricane Milton and to ensure that people are safe, including ensuring federal, state, and local resources are being coordinated in a smart and efficient and effective way. We have also been in constant contact with the leaders in Florida to make sure that we are cutting any red tape that might get in the way of getting relief to folks, to make sure also that communities receive the resources and the support that they need as quickly as possible. Already, we have sent more than 1,000 federal personnel to be on the ground in Florida to assist with what needs to happen in the state to prepare for this hurricane, and we will continue to scale up those efforts. To the people of Florida, and in particular, the people of the Tampa region, we urge you to take this storm seriously. As has been said before, this is a storm that is expected to be of historic proportion. And many of you, I know, are tough, and you've ridden out these hurricanes before. This one's going to be different. And so we ask you that by every measure, understand it's going to be more dangerous, more deadly, and more catastrophic. So please listen to your local officials. They know what they're talking about. They know what they're doing. And if you are told to evacuate, please evacuate immediately. Do not wait until it is too late. And in the hours and days ahead, President Biden and I and our administration will continue to do everything we can to protect the people who have been in the path of this storm. And once the storm has passed, we will be there to help folks recover and rebuild, as we continue to do for those communities in Florida, Georgia, North and South Carolina, and across the Southeast who have been devastated by Hurricane Helene. Finally, as the president mentioned, to any company that or individual that might use this crisis to exploit people who are desperate for help through illegal fraud or price gouging, whether it be at the gas pump, the airport, or the hotel counter, know that we are monitoring these behaviors and the situation on the ground very closely, and anyone taking advantage of consumers will be held accountable. The bottom line is this hurricane poses an extreme danger, and we urge everyone in Florida to take extreme caution. And we are with you, and we will get through this together.
Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee this year, taking part virtually in a hurricane briefing. President Joe Biden speaking from the Eisenhower Executive Office building. The two were then briefed by the Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, the President's Homeland Security Advisor Liz Sherwood-Randall, the FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell, and the National Weather Service Director Ken Graham, along with the National Hurricane Center Director Michael Brennan. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell held a standalone news conference earlier in the day during which she was asked about FEMA funding and the two big hurricanes.
Next question is from Tom Frank.
Hi, thanks very much. How much is in the disaster relief fund today?
So the report that I got yesterday, which is public, is I think it was just over $11 billion was in there as of yesterday morning.
Sorry, you said at a hearing about a year ago when the supplemental that the administration had requested was in doubt, that the amount of money left in the DRF, quote, would be insufficient to cover all of our ongoing life-saving operations. Is that an issue right now?
So we monitor our disaster relief fund very carefully, Tom, and we use different methods to make sure that we can always meet life-saving needs. The biggest tool we have is what we call immediate needs funding, and we keep a reserve within our disaster relief fund to make sure that I can always cover these life-saving activities like we're seeing right now. And that's exactly what we did. We went into immediate needs funding on August 7th of this year to ensure I had enough money, which is what we needed to respond to Hurricane Helene. With the CR, I've been given the full authority to spend against the president's fiscal year 25 budget. And so I have the funding and sufficient resources to support the ongoing responses to Hurricane Helene as well as Hurricane Milton. But I'm going to have to evaluate how quickly we're burning the remaining dollars within the disaster relief fund to see if I'm going to have to go back in and ask for additional funding sooner than what Congress is on right now. So, you know, we had thought that we would go into immediate needs funding in December or January. I need to assess that every day to see if I'm going to be able to wait that long.
FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell in a virtual news conference. This is Washington Today. Donald Trump, former president and Republican presidential nominee, posting on his Truth Social network, Western North Carolina, and the whole state for that matter, has been totally and incompetently mismanaged by Harris-Biden. They can't get anything done properly, but I will make up for lost time and do it right when I get there. Hold on and vote these horrible public servants, in quotes, out of office. They are incapable of doing the job, and Kamala is even worse than Biden, MAGA 2024. Also, the News and Observer in North Carolina reports that House Speaker Mike Johnson plans to travel to Western North Carolina on Wednesday evening to survey the damage from Hurricane Helene. Congressman Chuck Edwards announced in a news release Tuesday. Edwards said Johnson plans to visit towns and small businesses hit by the storm. Donald Trump today campaigned in Scranton, Pennsylvania. In his more than hour-long speech, he talked about a number of issues, not just the hurricane, but he did mention Hurricane Milton along the way.
I also want to send our love to everyone in Florida. They're going through a big one tonight. It's going to arrive tonight sometime around midnight, a little before midnight, and we're praying for them and asking God to keep them all safe, all those people. I've never seen a hurricane like that. I don't know. It's so often, you know, they talk about it and they talk because they want you to watch. This is the real deal. This is a bad one. And we have some great governors, great Republican governors that are in charge, and I think they'll do a phenomenal job. I think they're going to do a phenomenal job.
Donald Trump, former president and Republican presidential nominee in Scranton, Pennsylvania. FloridaPolitics.com writes that Congressman Carlos Jimenez is bashing peddlers of misinformation ahead of Hurricane Milton's expected landfall Wednesday, and he gave an especially strong shove to one of the more conspiracy theory-prone colleagues. Quote, sharing an ex-post by Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene in which the far-right Georgia Republican wrote, "Yes, they can control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say it can't be done." Jimenez fired off a zinger. Humans can't create or control hurricanes, he wrote. Anyone who thinks they can needs to have their head examined. That was from FloridaPolitics.com. Returning to former President Trump, the Republican presidential nominee in Scranton, Pennsylvania, as mentioned, his speech was on a number of issues dealing with the presidential campaign.
5 years ago, we were a very respected country. And I don't want to say this too loudly because it could happen, but I don't fall down stairs. I don't fall on platforms. I don't fall off bicycles. I have a great memory. I can talk about hundreds of things at one time and always get back to that point that you were trying to make. I can do things that people can't do, but you know what? We have the biggest, this is the most important period in the history of our country, because our country, this is a nation in decline. We are a nation in decline. We're a failing nation. We're a failing nation. And they have no clue what to do. She wants to raise everybody's taxes, and what they do, you know, today, they used to go to different states. If Pennsylvania was high, they go to another state. But now they go to different countries. Other countries want our business. They want our companies. And a lot of them have left. The pharmaceutical business left. A lot of industries have left. We're keeping them, and we're going to get all those people back. We're going to make it so they practically have to come back. So we'll take in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs, and we're going to make our country so strong and so rich, it will never be so rich. You know, we used to be an all-tariff country in the 1890s, 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s, all tariffs. That was when our country was the richest it ever was. It was never rich like that. It was so rich that they had to set up a commission, the Great Tariff Commission of like 1887. It had one function: what to do with all the money. We had so much money, we didn't know what to do with it. And then in the 1900s, they brilliantly went to the income tax, where everybody gets taxed, and foreign companies could come in and just steal our treasure and our jobs, steal our wealth. And honestly, we've never really been the same. The country made so much money, and other countries lived. They were fine. But we're like taking care of the whole world, and it's time for the world to take care of us. Does that make sense? Time to take care of us.
Donald Trump campaigning in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Story from Bloomberg News. The Kremlin confirmed that former U.S. President Donald Trump, while in office, sent Russian President Vladimir Putin COVID-19 testing devices during the height of the pandemic, as recounted in a new book by journalist Bob Woodward. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said on Wednesday that the test had been sent, but denied the book's claim the two leaders had spoken by phone several times since Trump left office. Donald Trump has denied both claims in Bob Woodward's book. The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was asked about this today at her news conference.
Russia said today that the COVID testing material that was given to Putin by Trump was nothing abnormal. Back then, there was a lot of trading going on of material. Is that true? And then if it is true, why was the president going after Trump yesterday at the KC fundraiser over giving Putin this material?
I mean, look, that was a political event, so I'm going to let the president speak to whatever what he said at that event. I'm not going to say go beyond that. What I will say is, as it relates to what happened in the last administration, how then the president behaved and what he was able to do, whatever's being reported, I'm going to leave it to the 2020, that time in 2020, to that administration. Look, what I can say, and we can say very proudly and forcefully, I believe, is how this president responded to a once-in-a-century pandemic. He put forth a comprehensive strategy to move forward, to get shots in arms, money in pockets at a time where the economy was at a tailspin. And This is a president that took that very, very seriously, along with a critical partnership that he had with the vice president. And that's why we've seen the economy turn around. That's why we all sitting here today without masks on, because the president actually took this seriously and made sure that we were able to get out of the pandemic. That's what I'm going to speak to. The president said what he wanted to say yesterday, and I'll leave it as that.
But I guess, is it just adding to misinformation then? Because that what the last president at that time was doing what it sounds like he thought was the right thing. Everybody needed material at that time.
I'm going to let the former president speak for himself and how he behaved and the actions that he's took. That is for him to speak to. What I can speak to is what the president has done over the last 3.5 years.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at her news conference today in the White House briefing room. A transcript of President Joe Biden at the re-election event for Senator Bob Casey, Democrat of Pennsylvania, yesterday in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, reads, "Did you see what came out today? It came out today that when in the middle of the pandemic we were short on tests, that we could get tests to people. And by the way he handled the pandemic was a disgrace. Over 1 million people died. But guess what? Those tests to determine whether you had COVID were in short supply. So we called his good friend Putin, not a joke, and made sure he had a test. He had the test. What the hell is wrong with this guy? I'm serious. I'm being deadly earnest." That was the transcript from President Joe Biden at yesterday's event. Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz, the Democratic presidential and vice presidential nominees, have also spoken about this in the past 2 days. Another article from Reuters. U.S. President Joe Biden spoke by phone with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday, and the two leaders were expected to discuss Israeli plans for a retaliatory strike on Iran. The call, underway late Wednesday morning U.S. time, was the leaders' first known chat since August and coincided with a sharp escalation of Israel's conflict with both Iran and the Iran-backed Lebanese Hezbollah, with no sign of an imminent ceasefire to end the conflict with Iran-backed Hamas in Gaza. That was from Reuters. Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, also asked about this.
Did the president at any point in this phone call, he said that it was constructive, urge the prime minister to not take certain actions as they relate to either the situation in Lebanon or potential retaliatory strikes against Iran?
So look, I'm going to say what I said moments ago. This was a continued discussion on the leaders level. As you know, the staff level has been talking since last week, and it is certainly to continue to speak to the response on Iran's attack and a long list of other conversations and issues that they wanted to discuss between the two leaders. I don't have anything else to speak to or to say. There's going to be a readout shortly that will have a little bit more detail of that conversation. I'm just not going to get into specifics from here.
Would it be safe to say that the president now has a clear understanding of and a clear picture of what Israel's plans are for retaliating against
What I can
Iran?
tell you is they had a discussion. They continued their discussion on a response to Iran's attack. A discussion last week, a discussion that certainly started at the staff level, and now the two leaders were able to have a productive, a straightforward, honest conversation, as they tend to do. I don't have anything beyond that.
The White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at today's White House news conference. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said at his news conference that so far more than 1,100 U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, and their family members have left Lebanon on U.S. organized flights as Israel continues its war with Hezbollah. Story from BBC News. Both the Falkland Islands and Gibraltar will remain British, Sir Keir Starmer has pledged. The Labour government's decision last week to hand sovereignty over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius prompted fierce criticism from the Conservatives and concerns about the future of the UK's other overseas territories. But the Prime Minister told MPs the Falklands and Gibraltar are British and they will remain British. He said the issue was a personal one for him because his uncle had nearly died when his ship was torpedoed defending the Falklands, referring to the 1982 war. Here was the exchange during Prime Minister's questions today in the House of Commons in London between the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and Ed Davey, Liberal Democrat Party leader.
One of the many problems for our economy coming from the dreadful Brexit deal was the red tape that's been put on businesses. Now, there are many examples of that, Mr. Speaker, but a new example came to me earlier this week, and it affects fishermen in the Falklands. who are otherwise having to pay huge amounts in tariffs to be able to sell to be able to sell their produce into the European market or sail under a Spanish flag. So when the Prime Minister renegotiates the trade deal, can you remember the overseas territories? And ensure that British citizens fishing off the Falklands can sail proudly under the Union Jack?
Prime Minister.
My uncle nearly lost his life when his ship was torpedoed defending the Falklands. They are British and they will remain British. And sovereignty in Gibraltar is equally not to be negotiated. Of course, we will do everything we can to make it easier for all businesses to trade more freely so that we can grow our economy. I'm very, very clear about the Falklands. It's personal to me.
The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Labour Party leader, questioned by Ed Davey, head of the Liberal Democrat Party, during today's Prime Minister's question time in the British House of Commons in London. The Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic are a self-governing British overseas territory. The 1982 Falklands War between Great Britain and Argentina ended with the Argentine forces, which had invaded, surrendering. Argentina still claims sovereignty over the islands. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Friday nights, watch C-SPAN's 2024 Campaign Trail, a weekly roundup of C-SPAN's campaign coverage, providing a one-stop shop to discover what the candidates across the country are saying to voters, along with first-hand accounts from political reporters, updated poll numbers, fundraising data, and campaign ads. Watch C-SPAN's 2024 Campaign Trail, Friday nights at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN, online at cspan.org, or download as a podcast on C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or wherever you get your podcasts. C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of politics.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. It's free, and wherever you find your podcasts. Story from ABC News. Vice presidential nominees Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz will campaign in Arizona on Wednesday as early voting begins in a state that could decide the presidential race and control of the Senate. Both Vance and Walz will hold rallies in Tucson on Wednesday. Vance will also participate in a town hall later in the day in Mesa, hosted by the Conservative Political Action Conference, while Walz will hold an event in Chandler with Senate candidate Congressman Ruben Gallego and Jim McCain, son of the former Republican Senator John McCain. With less than a month until Election Day, the race between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris to win the battleground state remains tight. According to 538's latest forecast, Trump leads Harris by just 1 percentage point in the state. That was from ABC News. We covered some of these events today on C-SPAN. Begin with Tim Walz in Chandler, Arizona. In front of a lectern with the sign Veterans and Military Families for Harris Walz. One of the introductory speakers was Jim McCain.
I recently made the decision to switch parties. This was not an easy decision. I made that choice because I believe we must stand up for what is right, for the values we have all fought for in this room, for the decency, for the leadership that puts our country first. I cannot, like many of you, sit back while the principles that make this nation strong come under attack. My father believed in something bigger than himself. He believed in service, in integrity, and in fighting for what is right, even when it wasn't popular. This spirit of fighting for what is right, even when it's not popular, I see this same spirit in Vice President Harris and Governor Tim Walz. They both understand what sacrifice means. The Vice President is someone who, like all of us, believe that those who are buried in Arlington made the ultimate sacrifice and respects them. I'm going to be honest, it was not easy to hear the things that have been said over the last few years about my father, about the service to his country. My father was shot down. He was held captive for more than 5 years. He endured that pain, and through it all, he loved his country and the men and women next to him. He held on. And yet, for those recently have dismissed what he did. They've made light of it, and it's been a very painful experience. But it's also why we continue to stand up for the values that we know are true in this country.
Jim McCain, son of the late Republican Senator from Arizona John McCain, today in Chandler, Arizona, with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the Democratic vice presidential nominee.
And I have to think, when we're in this space, thinking of John McCain, thinking about the folks who are out there, thinking about Republicans that Representative Gallego serves with, who have had the courage to come out and stand up and speak about this. To see Liz Cheney, I don't know my time in Congress. I don't know if I ever agreed with Liz Cheney on anything. But I agree with her that America cares. That used to be okay. We all know this. And to see them standing up and coming out and saying, this is what we need to do, this is how we unify the country. It's not my expectation that everybody agrees with everything, but there's some foundational principles. Respecting the rule of law, respecting elections when they happen, not dividing Americans based on how they vote, but understand we're all in it together, and then deliver for them. So you coming here, and veterans, you carry another burden when you come back. There are few institutions that people respect more in our country right now than it's a veteran. And so when you speak the truth, when you speak about what you know, when you speak about unity, when you have role models that are able to do that, that really matters. So I have to tell you, on behalf of Vice President Harris, thanks for taking time out of your day. Thanks for caring enough about the country. Thanks for believing that it doesn't need to be this way. We don't need to continue to tear people down. The Vice President often says that the mark of a good leader is not who you can tear down and give a nickname to, it's who you can lift up, especially at a time of need. And I guarantee you, we will get Florida through this with Milton. We will bring together, we'll make sure we're there, and that commitment that Abraham Lincoln charged us to, with the folks standing in this room have made happen, with Vietnam veterans who changed our attitude about how we care for veterans. This is a foundational thing that makes our country stronger. And I will tell you this, that legislation we did in Minnesota about the veterans bill, about pulling it out or whatever, it inspired faith in democracy and it toned down the rhetoric. And I think Kamala Harris has that same vision of the things that we can do together. So on behalf of both of us, thank you. And look, I've been saying this to these guys, we're down to just a few days left, 27 days. I've been saying I got a catchphrase, you guys all know this, you sleep when you're dead, that's what you do. I'm gonna have to be careful with this. Someone came up to me and said, you're taking that too literally, you look like hell, man. But I have to tell you, the privilege of fighting for this democracy, the privilege that we were given to wear that uniform and to conduct ourselves with dignity is absolutely a privilege in this country. Billions of people around the world could only dream of gathering as free people to determine the direction we're going to go. And I'll tell you what, this is about the Constitution over a single individual. This is about rule of law, being able to do whatever the hell you want. And this is about making sure you put your fellow citizens above personal gain. That's what veterans know more than ever. Let's do it. Thank you.
Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, campaigning in Chandler, Arizona, along with Jim McCain, son of the late Senator John McCain, Republican of Arizona, and Congressman Ruben Gallego, Democrat of Arizona, running for the U.S. Senate seat that has been opened with the retirement of Senator Kyrsten Sinema, an independent. Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, the Republican vice presidential nominee, campaigned today in Tucson, Arizona.
Last time we were in Arizona, I believe we were in Scottsdale. And Usha, my beautiful wife, we brought our 3 little kids with us, and it was about 115 degrees in Scottsdale. And then somebody said something to me on the street. They said, well, it's okay, it's just a dry heat. And I thought, you must be a Kamala Harris voter, because 115 degrees feels hot, whether it's a dry heat or a moist heat or whatever it is. But look, speaking of Kamala Harris, I don't know if you all saw, she had an amazing for us, amazing for all of us, an incredible interview with The View. Did you all see that? Now, they asked Kamala Harris this amazing question, and you think, step back for a second. Remember, Kamala's entire campaign is running on, she doesn't even know who Joe Biden is, right? She pretends that she is not the sitting vice president of the United States, and her entire campaign is to run as much as she can, as far as she can, from Joe Biden and his disastrous record. So you would think that when she's asked the question, well, what has Joe Biden done that you disagree with, that she might actually have a halfway decent answer. And I know we're going to try to put this up. Can we run that clip now? Because I'd love to put that up and show people what she actually said when she was asked this question.
Well,
Go ahead.
If anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Wait for it.
J. Trump, and I approve this message.
It's, you know, I'm Donald J. Trump and I approve that message. That was my idea. Because remember, and for especially for those folks who are watching at home on TV or are going to see the clips later, Kamala Harris, she cast the deciding vote on trillions of dollars of new spending, which increased the price of food, of groceries, of housing, and of everything else. Kamala Harris supported the policies that shut down American oil and natural gas, shut down pipelines, and that drove the cost of energy about 45% higher for Arizona families. Kamala Harris came into office as the border czar, bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that, and now Tucson is facing a historic border crisis and a historic increase in crime, in fentanyl, in drug trafficking and sex trafficking. Kamala Harris bears the failures, she bears the responsibilities for the failures of the Joe Biden regime. Don't let her run away from a record. It is Kamala Harris's fault that this country is not doing as well as it should.
Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, the Republican vice presidential nominee, a rally today in Tucson, Arizona. Associated Press article says that this year's presidential battleground states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, represent 18% of the country's population, but have dominated the attention of the Democratic and Republican presidential candidates and their running mates. Through Tuesday, they have just over 200 total campaign stops, 3/4 of which have been to those 7 states, according to a database of campaign events that is based on AP reporting. Pennsylvania alone has been visited 41 times, the most of any state. That article was from AP. Politico reports today that former President Donald Trump plans to hold a rally at Madison Square Garden Arena in New York City and will hold a rally near Coachella, California on Saturday as he heads to 2 blue states in the final stretch of the presidential election. This year's presidential election is a contest for 270 electoral votes, and in some scenarios in which some states Donald Trump wins and some states Kamala Harris wins, it may come down to a Democratic-leaning region of Nebraska near Omaha. Nebraska allocates its 5 electoral votes, not winner take all, but 2 votes for the statewide popular vote winner and then 1 each for the winner of the state's 3 congressional districts. And the so-called blue dot, where Democrats could win, is Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. The issue came up during last night's debate between that district's incumbent congressman, a Republican, Don Bacon, and the Democratic challenger, Tony Vargas. The Cook Political Report with Amy Walter does rate this race as a toss-up. Here's that exchange.
Taking a look at the topic of winner take all, a question from Cassidy Arena in Nebraska Public Media. Cassidy?
Both of you have argued different and partisan sides on how Nebraska should handle electoral college votes in presidential elections. What is your reason for supporting a Republican-backed change to winner-take-all or preserving the Democratic-backed status quo of what some call the blue dot? Let's start with Senator Vargas.
One, I actually don't think this is about partisanship. I think this is about earning the support of Nebraska's 2nd district. You know, we are really unique here in Nebraska. Proud to be part of somebody that was raised in elected office and in public service in the unicameral. I learned how to get things done. I learned how to work across the aisle. It's why I've been elected to leadership. It's why I've been a member of our executive board 6 of my last 8 years. But when it comes to this independence, I think it matters that Republicans, Democrats, and independents in this district support you having to fight to earn the vote of Nebraska's 2nd district voters. Trump won this district in 2016. Biden won it in 2020. But I think what's really concerning to me is when Congressman Bacon says he cares about democracy, but he signed on to a letter just 2 months before a major presidential election saying he supports repealing winner-take-law because Donald Trump asked him to and was handsomely rewarded with his endorsement just within 2 weeks.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman, same question.
That last part all made up again.
I wish he needs to be fact-checked on middle-class tax cuts and middle tax increases and all the things he's been saying. I hope the media makes him show the substance, right? He doesn't have any substance. It's a bunch of platitudes with no meat behind it. Now, I would hope that every state would do like Nebraska. I think it would be a better system, because I think it would get the president nominees out to all the different parts of the country more than what it is today. And I think it would help them get to parts of California they ordinarily wouldn't go, or New York, or maybe Texas, that's typically all Republican. And it would be better for democracy. However, we only have 2 states doing this, and this creates significant distortions in the final results. And Tony loves it. He's all about the money. You know, Vice President Harris has spent $21 million here, and President Trump has spent 0. And it reminds me of Tony taking $60,000 from a dark money group. And why did he do that? It was for his personal expenses, and it's under investigation.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator, rebuttal?
One, I care about democracy for Nebraska and 2nd District voters. And what you heard, unfortunately, which is incredibly concerning on behalf of people in this district, is Congressman Bacon didn't respond to why he signed on to a letter giving up our electoral independence 2 months before a major presidential election. If he cared about the independence, he wouldn't have signed on to the letter. But it's very interesting to me that within 2 weeks, he earned Donald Trump's endorsement. Donald Trump wanted to undermine this election. He's been fighting for it. He's been very, very clear. But what I'm fighting for is I'm fighting for you. It's why I voted for $6 billion worth of taxes. It's also the reason why I want to lower your costs. But Don Bacon has received more than $6 million from special interests in his entire career. It's no surprise this is why he votes against common sense gun safety laws, why he's voted to raise your taxes, why he's voted to raise your health care costs and your health insurance premiums. And we get to hold him accountable on November 5th.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman, would you like to respond to the comments about the letter?
He likes it because it brings in $21 million for him and his side of the ticket. So if you're a Democrat, it's a cash cow. But it creates such distortions if you're on the other side. I think we'd be better off if every district did as we did, because it would level it out. It would be fair. When Tony lived in New York City, did he ask for New York to go by district? It's a winner-take-all there. We would have won this last election 5 or 6 electoral votes out of that. Does he want California to go by district? It is a partisan position that he has when it's all said and done, because it's a huge cash cow for his side of the aisle, and it helps the Democrats up and down the ticket. Again, I'll come back and say I wished every district or every state did as we did. It would be better.
Congressman Don Bacon, Republican from Nebraska, debating Democratic challenger Tony Vargas in last night's debate. Don Bacon going for his 5th term, and this is a rematch from 2 years ago, Bacon narrowly defeating Tony Vargas. Don Bacon mentioned that there are 2 states in the United States that do not have winner-take-all for the Electoral College. Nebraska's one, Maine is the other. And on the subject of the debates, you can find more U.S. House and U.S. Senate debates, along with presidential election coverage at C-SPAN's Campaign 2024 page at cspan.org. From Associated Press, former Senator Tim Johnson, a centrist who was the last Democrat to hold statewide office in South Dakota and who was adept at securing federal funding for projects back home during his nearly 3 decades in Washington, has died. He was 77. Johnson, who was first elected to Congress in 1986 and retired from the Senate in 2015, died Tuesday night of complications from a recent stroke. Family friend Steve Hildebrand said in a news release he was surrounded by family. That was the reporting from Associated Press. Senator Johnson gave his farewell speech on the Senate floor in 2014.
Each party, rather than working cooperatively for the American people, is more and more focused on winning the next election. Today, days after the 2014 election, you can walk into the call center for either party and find members dialing for dollars for 2016. Tonight, there will be fundraisers across D.C. where members will discuss policy not with your constituents, but with organizations that contribute to their campaigns. Mr. President, we have lost our way. My thoughts are not original. My colleague and dear friend from South Dakota, Senator Tom Daschle, in his farewell, called for finding common ground that will not be found on the far right or on the far left. That is not where most Americans live. We will only find it in the firm middle ground based on common sense and shared values.
Former Senator Tim Johnson, Democrat from South Dakota, his farewell speech on the Senate floor in late 2014. He has died at the age of 77. Current Senator John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, who, by the way, Tim Johnson beat when the two ran against each other for Senate in 2002, posted on X, "Kimberly and I join all South Dakotans in mourning the loss of former Senator Tim Johnson. Known for his tenacity and work ethic, Tim was a steadfast leader who dedicated his life to serving the people of South Dakota with integrity and compassion. He fought tirelessly for rural America and leaves a legacy that will have a lasting impact for years to come. We're praying for Barbara and their entire family and know that Tim's remarkable life will continue to inspire future generations." That post from Senator John Thune. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.